So, about a year ago, James and Fred sat down for the first ever episode of the McKinney Podcast. I might tear up a little bit. And we laid out a vision for what this thing just might be if we played our cards right, if we got buy-in from the most important stakeholders, the audience, the second most important stakeholders, our guests, and thirdly, we have each other as stakeholders because I'm responsible to you and you're responsible to me.
That's right.
And here we are after a whole year of doing the McKinney Podcast together. And if you're listening to this or watching this on our YouTube channel, you've been along for the ride too. So as we get into our 1-year anniversary episode, right as the music hit, just perfect timing on the music, man. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to our listeners, our watchers, the folks that have been along for the ride, made guest suggestions, had comments, promoted what they like about it, told us what they wanted to see more of and less of. So thanks for being a part of the experience out there, listener and watcher. I've had a lot of fun, Fred.
I've had a ton of fun. And I tell you what, big shout out to the people that have commented. And actually, I have a small collection of friends and contacts that through phone calls, through text messages, and through online messaging have given me attaboys and it's like, what? Or even, when we foreshadowed things, they're like, you're not going to have that person on. I'm like, well, yes, we are. So thank you to, those people that, care enough to actually, let their voices be heard. Because truthfully, James, have you checked your bank account for exactly how many commas you put in for what you've gotten paid to do this?
Oh, wait, you have commas in your numbers? No, I don't have any. Well, I don't have any commas.
I dream, I have like 000, comma 000, comma 000, but it leads with zero.
That'd be a billion.
That's right. Because
but there's a zero at the front?
Yes.
I don't think the math is mathing.
It's not mathing because, when it comes down to it, when we sat down and talked about this, it was never hey man, how can we monetize this?
Yeah.
Or, I think I can retire off of this podcast. It was never about that. It was really about, man, there are so many things going on in our community.
Yeah.
And people need to know.
If you count this studio and if you count what we pay the production team and you count anything other than our time, which I'm not counting that, we're almost 20 grand in the hole just on what it takes to make this thing happen to the degree that it does. So anybody who's like, oh, well, you're just trying to be famous or make money from it. Well, if that is our goal, we're really bad at it.
Right. Put a big old F on our report card for failure because there's to date we have endorsed and we haven't been sponsored or
we have turned down sponsor money.
That's right.
So what are we going to do in this episode, folks? Fred and I both went through the entire catalog, all 54 episodes that have been dropped up to this point. And Fred and I are just going to go tit for tat on a great moment in the first year of the McKinney Podcast and just share some of our favorites with you. I'd love to hear from you and comments, messages, email to mail@mckinneypodcast.com. However you want to communicate with us. We'd love to hear what your favorite moment, or maybe a few moments if there's more than one, what have you enjoyed in this first year? Because I feel like we're really just starting to figure out how to do this well. And the numbers say that, people are starting to pay more attention. Oh, that's great. We're almost 500 downloads an episode now, and that's without a dollar spent on advertising.
Nope.
Now, in our second year, we're gonna start putting a little bit of effort into advertising and getting people involved more intentionally, rather than just, we're going to put an episode out and see what happens.
And we have seen some stuff happen. I just want to say that, as we're recording this, we are wrapping up election season here.
Thank God.
And
I'm so ready.
And I tell you, the podcast has taken some heat to the chops, for we've been accused of things and we're like, look,
the funny thing is the people that make those accusations, and the accusations that they make, it's so obvious that they have not listened to one episode. Because some of the things that Fred and I are accused of, it's just comical because it's obvious that people aren't actually listening or watching before they make these personal attacks. You know, there were multiple people that were not at the city council debate that Fred, you and I put on.
That's right.
With our beautiful wives together, the four of us. And there was attacks made about, well, you should recuse yourself because you're the moderator and you were completely not biased, not unbiased. You were not impartial. I'm like, you weren't there. If you had seen one moment of of the footage from that, which, by the way, is posted on our YouTube channel for all to see, even the candidates themselves would say that they got a fair shake. So it's the haters, I just find it amusing because there's a certain level of, what's the math term? A direct correlation between how ignorant someone is and how loudly they share their opinion. Typically the more intelligent someone is, the less they feel the need to bark at people with what they know.
What they call that, directly proportional?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, there we go.
Directly proportional versus inversely proportional. Yes. I had to dig out my high school math there.
I was sitting there going, I was like, come on, Asian, don't let me down. You know this.
Man, you own that Asian identity, don't you?
I absolutely do. But you know what, though? I think that's part of what makes,
that's so funny.
Makes us, who we are. I'm like, I remember who I say this to, but this is my big joke. It's like, I didn't wake up one day and go, oh my goodness, I'm Asian. I was like, I've been this way my whole life, and I don't shy away from it, and I take pride in my Filipino-ness, and I also can laugh at my Filipino-ness. So if you're Filipino, you know what I'm talking about.
But I mean,
exactly what I'm talking about.
The interesting thing is when you think about math, you think about just numbers. There are more people on this planet that would fall into the category of Asian than any other classification of people. Certainly more so than white or some version of Western European or whatever.
Well, math, multiplication.
But I mean,
Asians take that seriously.
That's such a broad thing. And even when you say something, I know you're joking, like Asians take that seriously. It's like, there's like 20 or 30 different versions of quote unquote Asian.
That's right.
And, someone who's from the Philippines can consider themselves Asian. Someone who's from Nepal or Bangladesh or India or Pakistan or whatever can consider themselves Asian.
That's right.
And then you get into the main countries people think of when you say Asia, Japan,
China,
Korea, China, Vietnam, and whatnot. Like each one of these groups have such a distinct quality about them.
That's right.
But they're all Asian.
That's right.
It's like that is
and it's
so much more complicated than white.
Yes. But in the same aspect of that, just hyper generalization, is a lot of the things that we have faced as the McKinney Podcast, because people, instantly assume, oh, you're podcasters, you're in it for, for your glory, for your gain, for your whatever. You're going to say whatever it is that the sponsors tell you to say, whatever their dollars tell you to say. There's this great generalization.
Joke's on you. There ain't no dollars.
That's right. It's like, check it out. I'm still broke. I'm still broke.
Man.
So I don't even know how we got there, but yes, absolutely.
I went there because I think it's funny how open you are about embracing your Asian heritage.
My Asianness, that's right.
I typically don't think of Filipinos as Asian. And then I met you, and it's like, oh, I guess they are Asian technically, yeah.
Yeah, well, way back in the day, I can remember filling out forms and stuff like that, and it was, ethnicity, and it was white, black, Hispanic, or Latino, and Asian.
Yeah.
That was it.
Man, we've come a long way since then, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. We certainly have.
You want to go ahead and jump into these things?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, each one of us has 5, folks, and this is not in any particular order. So the first one's not number 1. The 10th one's not number 10. That's really not how it's going.
That's right.
So
these are really just highlight moments. Highlight moments for us.
Highlight moments. We're not going to have the music every time, but by George, see what I did there? By George, we're going to have that. When we sat down to put this thing together, folks, we really wanted to start off with the man who has been at the center of McKinney's identity as a person for, as long as I can remember. We moved our office to McKinney in 2016. We still lived in Plano at the time, but that's when I started living in McKinney and sleeping in Plano, as they say. And from the very beginning, George Fuller was mayor of McKinney. So when I dreamt up this thing, the McKinney Podcast and recruited Fred to be such a huge part of this.
Let's go.
My whole thought process was episode 1, George Fuller. After that, not really sure. I've got a whole bunch of people I want to have on there. But episode 1 needs to be George Fuller. What's up? How's it going, Pictureland? There you go. In real time, folks, right
That's
there and
right.
there. Yeah, you'll see that on the group later. But we wanted to have George on for the very first episode. And say what you will about George, like him, don't like him, I don't really care. He's the mayor, and he's been the leader of our city during probably the most climactic years that we've ever had as a city. We have gone through COVID. We've gone through all the challenges of growth and infrastructure, and George has been the mayor for 8 years now.
That's right.
So what a great place to start.
That's right.
And
I can say that, when we moved from the Tampa, Florida area, we looked all around the Metroplex, and we settled here in McKinney. Actually, we settled. It's not that we settled. I'm going to take that back. We didn't settle for McKinney. We were excited that it wasn't Frisco, it wasn't Allen, it wasn't Plano, it wasn't Dallas, or any of those things. We were truly excited to move to McKinney. Yep. And this was in December of 2010, and we didn't know anybody or anything. We didn't even know the square was in McKinney. We thought McKinney was down there where Custer and 121 meet. Which is
potentially one of the most challenging parts of all McKinney. That intersection is terrible.
That's right. But we were excited for, what we saw around in the neighborhoods, all the family things. That's why we moved here. And then when George became mayor, even then I wasn't really sure of who he was or what was going on. But what I've seen since 2010, and a majority of that has been under Mayor Fuller's leadership, have been nothing but incredible. And so I do parallel your thoughts there, James. Like him or love him, he has done a lot.
Or hate his guts.
That's right.
You still can't take away the man's accomplishments.
That's right. That's right. There are so many things that, just look around. Look at the growth. And we can complain about the growth. And I'm not discounting the growth. I'm not discounting the traffic and all those other things. But when you see how many people want to move to McKinney, there's a reason why. And Mayor George Fuller cannot be separated from that reason why.
And my favorite part about all this is he's about to be out of office. He's going to spend some time in Colorado, going to spend some time with his kids and grandkids. We probably won't see much of him in the public eye for a while. He'll let the next mayor have their say, whoever that is. I'm curious who people are going to put their hate on next, because George has been such a convenient whipping boy.
That's right.
For those that like to chronically complain about everything.
That's true.
Who's the next victim? I wonder.
Whoever's in that office.
Oh, man.
But we also know, on a tangential side note, that there will be people who voted for somebody who will not be the next mayor or city councilman or any of those things.
Or woman.
And how long will that go on?
As long as humans are breathing oxygen. What's the first thing on your list there?
All righty. The first thing on my list, I'm going to start right off with our very own Lisa Hermes. Lisa, she's,
Madam President.
That's right. From Beeville. Is it Beeville or Beesville? It's Beeville. Beeville, Texas.
South of San Antonio.
That's right. Little nowhere. And, eventually, she, in many ways, I think, that Don't Stop Believing, just a small town girl.
Yeah.
And here she is now. And she is larger than life. You cannot go anywhere in McKinney that people do not know who Lisa Hermes is.
Yeah.
And, she has this drive, this dedication. And, the other day when I was talking with another person who's got deep roots in McKinney and in Collin County, they both worked at the chamber together way back in the day. And to think that, she, small town, eventually wound up here, worked for the chamber, did other things, and now, she is, El Queso Mas Grande.
The big cheese.
Poor Spanish, that's right.
I was about to say, that's terrible Spanish. To our Spanish-speaking audience, I apologize.
Right.
Yeah.
I had to say that for, all of my gringo friends, that's how they would say it.
You're not going to be confused for a Hispanic anytime soon.
No, not anytime soon. Not anytime soon. But yes, the fact that she would, she started at the yeoman class level with the chamber, And a lot of the things that we have nowadays, like Wham, she was part of the launch of that, where really it was just a fashion show type thing.
Yeah.
But she turned it around and made it a tangible, beneficial thing. I've seen so many great things that she has done with the chamber since, she has risen to that position. So that's definitely one of my favorite episodes.
The McKinney small business community is a lot better off because of Lisa Harmus and her efforts, for sure. Mm-hmm. Props to you, Lisa. We love you at the McKinney Podcast.
Round of applause.
Yep. So next, and I need to get some kind of a whoosh button. I don't have a whoosh button on this thing. I'm just like, megaphone? No, that doesn't work. What's like, we got a little sensor button. What do we have here? No, let's see if there's anything over here. No. Nope. Okay. No.
So we need a.
Oh no! It's not going to go away.
We just pull that slider down.
I'm going to pull the slider down. Never mind.
And hopefully it'll.
Oh, it's one of those. When your kids mess with your soundboard, folks, you never know what's going to come out.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I was trying to find a little whoosh button there, but we don't have it. So my next one is Mr. Roy Ponder, a.k.a. Pal Ponder on Weather.
Yes.
Everybody's favorite weatherman. I mean, what a guy. Is there not a more genuine, just down-to-earth, easygoing guy than Roy Ponder? I mean, what an amazing human. I'm glad to know him. And his rise to legitimate local celebrity, a weather celebrity, if there is such a thing. Yes. I mean, when you get to be more trusted and more respected and more relied upon than the full-time network TV professionals that are doing your profession, you've got something special going on. I met Roy, 2016, right up at the time we started doing the chamber, back when he was doing insurance. And he briefly was on our team here at RiskWell. It's one of my claim to fames in our city.
That's right.
Roy Ponder used to work here.
Yeah. You recruited him away from a Houston-based operation.
And come to find out, he wasn't a great fit for our team at the time because weather had already captured his attention. And man, he and I we talked about this in Roy's episode. Roy and I were in the drive-thru at the Arby's getting some lunch over there at Custer and Virginia. And that was the conversation where I was like, Roy, you can do weather full time. You don't owe me anything. Like, you don't have to stay here just because you're here. Like, have you considered doing weather full time? And he's like, well, yeah, I've considered it. It was like, well, maybe you should do it, man. Like, I think you'd be really good at it. He was like, I think I would too. Thanks. And it was like, thanks for the conversation. I'm just like, okay, cool. Well, what are you going to do about it? And like 2 or 3 weeks later, he resigned his position and started doing weather full time. And he was already great at it, of course.
Yeah.
But when he put his full effort into being a great weatherman, I mean, we've all seen what he's become. With going live on Facebook to having all of his YouTube empire and almost 200,000 subscribers.
And the Ponder on Weather cruise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a thing.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted a cruise ship and spent time with Roy and Chris Ponder for a week in the Caribbean.
Yeah. Like what do they call their fan club? Powers, Powettes, what,
I don't know.
I don't know what that is. But
whatever it is, I'm one of them.
That's right. Roy truly is amazing. Where I first met him also through the chamber when he was doing insurance, but when he really kicked off his weatherman life, as it were, his wife Chris, we're going to give big old props to Chris.
Yeah,
she was the artistry behind a lot of that stuff, a lot of his maps, a lot of his diagrams. She was the one behind a lot of all of that.
Oh yeah.
And so mad props to Roy, but he does have a team, and his wife.
Oh yeah,
and the venerable Mrs. Ponder.
I think you and Roy and I all suffer from the same malady / blessing, is that we married very strong, capable women.
Testify.
Who don't take anything less than the very, very best effort from their men.
That's right.
And they're, wonderful helpmates. And knowing Chris and knowing Elizabeth and obviously knowing Allison, yeah, that's very true for all three of those ladies.
Yes.
I mean,
They know our potential, they know our desire, and they won't let us half step that thing. It's like, you're all in and you're at 100%.
They take that for better or for worse
gas.
thing in the wedding vows.
That's right.
Very seriously.
That's right.
So
yes,
what's next on your list, my man?
Next on my list, let me come up here and look at my face. Oh, he is another one of those just local legends that if you have had the blessing of meeting him, or you've had the blessing of your children going through the school system, none other than Mr. Sean Pratt.
What a guy.
Down to earth. I've in a former career, I was in the public school system there in Hillsborough County, and the superintendent, I got to rub elbows with, 3 of the superintendents. And I mean, they were great people, but, I think they rubbed elbows with me because I was part of the system. To meet Sean Pratt and to see how down to earth he is, to see his approach, the personal discipline that he has lived by, the examples of other leaders in his life that have, held him to that high standard and expected, only the best of him, and how he has used that with the school district. I have just the utmost respect for him. And, the bonus is, not long after that interview, I got to meet his parents, and you can see the legacy of integrity and hard work. So, I really enjoyed that, and to be able to see, not only him in action with his team. I don't think he approaches them like, I am your superintendent, bow down and, kiss the ring.
No, certainly not.
He was definitely out there, and every time I've seen him, he has been sleeves rolled up in the trenches with them. Basically I hear you, I see you, I care for you, and let's do this together. So Sean Pratt, definitely one of my highlight interviews.
I'm struck as I think about this, and I think about each of the people that we have had the privilege of interviewing who are at the peak of their profession in our city. We already talked about George, of course, but the other city council people and Paul Grimes, city manager. You look at Mike Kowski, president of the MEDC. You look at Cindy Schneibel, president of the CDC. You look at Chief Paul Dow of McKinney Fire Department, Chief Joe Ellenberg of the McKinney Police Department, Superintendent Sean Pratt. It's like there's a thread with each of these senior leaders where there's a certain groundedness to them. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say that all of them are, quote unquote, humble, soft-spoken people, because, a few of those people that I just mentioned, I wouldn't say exude humility. They know who they are. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But there's certainly an extremely high level of care, concern, of diligence, and wisdom. Mm-hmm. That how many cities in our area can have just a list of people that strong across the city in various, executive capacities. McKinney really is better off because these humans are doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if I didn't reflect on that.
And, when I think about these people, I can say for every single one of those people you named, plus others, probably the phrase, I'm in it to win it, is probably something that goes through their head, but it's not, I'm in it to win it for me. It's, I'm in it to win it for you. I'm in it to win it for McKinney. I'm in it to win it for our community. Yeah. And, regardless of how they present themselves, because yes, there is a spectrum of what people would say their personality is. Mm-hmm. I would say that at the end of the day, their greatest motivation isn't, I'm going to leave a legacy with my name on it. It's, I want a legacy to be said of our city, of where we live. Yep. And, they go at it with that, this is not for me, this is for us.
There's a lot of power in us. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right along with that, my third one is Michael Quint, Director of Development Services.
Yes.
And man, Michael's episode was such a masterclass It was literally like a college textbook on how ideas become reality, of how something goes from concept to executed project. Whether it's a building, whether it's, a park, whether it's a new business.
Yeah, and it's not just, we're going to make success in this little square right here. It's like, how does this affect everything else around it? And not just right immediately now. It's next year, the year after that, because, we're going to work on a little success point right here, and they're all going to work together. That is crazy. That's like Legos on a whole nother level.
Oh man, I'm telling you. We were at a birthday party for a kid in our neighborhood, just this past Sunday as we record this, and we were sipping bourbon and smoking cigars in the backyard while the kids were playing video games upstairs and talking about the election and whatever else is going on. And I was explaining a couple of things on what we've talked about on this podcast. And it was just a bunch of dads, there around the what would be a fire pit if it was lit. And this guy next to me was like, "Man, you're really into politics, huh?" And I was just like, "No, I'm really not into politics. I think politics are pretty annoying, actually. But governance, the way that a city functions and how it happens, oh man, yeah, I'm really into city governance. Like, how do these things that we all take for granted day in and day out happen?" Well, I'll tell you, one of the people that makes these things happen day in and day out is Michael Quint and his team at the development office for the city. So
that's right. And if you have not tuned into that episode, let me just leave you with this. You need to find out about the secret cabal. Little teaser right there.
The secret cabal.
That's right. Go out there and find
the dark room where all the decisions are made.
That's right.
Nefarious, evil characters.
Find out about the secret cabal. But the only way you will is if you check out that episode.
Well, you know what they say with the first rule about Fight Club.
There is no Fight Club.
You don't talk about Fight Club.
We don't talk about Fight Club.
So
that's right.
You just broke the first rule,
That's
Fred.
right.
You can't talk about the cabal.
I know.
All right, what's your next one?
All right, my next one, hands down, the highest energy podcast we've ever had that had no breaks, or all gas and no breaks, AGNB, was with LaQuinthia LQ Fields.
I miss her.
I miss her too.
Man.
So LQ, when you tune in, come on back. All right.
What is that song? Baby, come back.
That's right. Player.
I just want to see.
That's right.
There was something. Just can't live without you, babe.
That's right. So,
LQ, come back, baby.
We need to have podcasting karaoke or something.
Oh man,
we got to figure that out.
If you want our audience to drop to zero instantly, we should make that happen.
No, listen, I know for a fact that there are a ton of our listenership and viewership that have legitimate talent,
Oh, no doubt.
And what I have to say though is that, I don't, my wife and I, we don't drink, and that's not a we're better than you, any of those things. But I have been to some karaoke, and there's some people who, when they get a little bit of beer courage on them, man, they're out there selling it, and it is great entertainment. It is great entertainment. So I think there's a place for it. Or it could be the Asian in me.
I have to confess.
Karaoke.
I have to confess.
Confession time. Hit it.
Oh, yeah. There we go. Thank you. Good point. I am so glad that video cameras were not as prevalent back in the late 2000s. Social media didn't really have that much video back then.
No.
Because there was a night in Nacogdoches, Texas, at Bullfrogs
in the neck
sports bar.
Oh no.
It was karaoke night. And I may or may not have lost a bet with my fraternity brothers. And I may or may not have had to sing Britney Spears' Hit Me Baby One More Time on stage at Bullfrogs, while my entire fraternity fell out laughing so hard. And
somewhere out there is a video. If you have that video, we need that stat.
I am so very glad there's not video.
Maybe there's
that.
Security camera footage from the bar that night.
Oh man, I've had equal parts shame and glee because it was so funny. I was like, this is a moment I'm going to remember for a long time. And yes, in case you're wondering, I belted that song like my life depended on it.
So we have the Jolly Green Giant, our Irish giant here.
What?
Tipping in at 6 6'6", 7?
6'6".
6'6".
Yeah.
Doing Britney Spears.
I would like to point out it was a lost bet in a fraternity. It was not a voluntary thing. But whenever you say karaoke and lots of alcohol being consumed, I remember that night.
But it was a hold my beer moment.
Because
not quite that way.
The problem is I was stone cold sober at that time.
Oh, even worse.
I didn't have anything to lean on for liquid courage.
Oh.
So
you're a bigger man than I.
Literally, I am a bigger man than you.
Yeah.
I probably outweigh you by 100 pounds. Oh, man.
But, getting back to LQ.
I'm sorry.
See, we invoked LQ's name, and that episode went off the rails. It was more off the rails than it was on the rails.
It was more than an hour long.
That's right. And there literally was I think we had a good 4 times where we've got to land this thing.
Yeah. And then we kept on not landing it.
That's right. So, full of energy, full of just laughter. We covered everything. Although I do have to say, she did pause between, it was in the lightning round, Frankie Beverly and Mays versus Beyonce. And if you want the answer to that one, you can have to go check it out.
You have to go listen to that episode. Okay, so switching gears a little bit here. My next one with 4 out of 5, and we're more than halfway here in this episode. Right. Was Mr. Roberto Gonzalez,
yes.
owner and co-founder of Wash Bros. Roberto's episode was so powerful because the guy came from literally nothing, where his whole family of, was it 6, right?
Yeah.
4 siblings, or 3 siblings and him and his mom and dad?
Yeah.
Living in a hotel room, the 6 of them, for weeks on end before they found their home in McKinney. And immigration is such a touchy subject, especially here in Texas, where we have such a huge border with Mexico and into Central America. But to hear a story from a young man who was brought to this country as a child and flourished.
Yes.
Found English in high school, went to McKinney Boyd High School, graduated, and then became a business owner, stayed here in his hometown, and started a business, employing his younger brother and several other people in a now successful business and becoming a productive, beneficial member of society. It's the definition of the American dream. And
absolutely.
Roberto, man, you're such an inspiration to a lot of folks.
That's right.
Mad respect, bro.
That's right. Love that. And, but there's so much in there. And I've known teenagers who have found some financial success and just ruined.
Yep.
Absolutely ruined. But he is so mature. He's not a teenager now, by the way. Just want to say that.
Yeah, he's like 23 or 24.
That's right. He's engaged to be married. And just to see how responsible he is and, doesn't shy away from hard work, doesn't shy away from a challenge. And, he's on this mission to be the best that he can be for himself, for his family, for his future wife, for his children, and you can just see that, and there is just so much that's promising there. However, I do recall, this has all of a sudden become there's some deception in his life, James.
What's that?
He got into the school that he got into on a lie.
That's right. I remember that.
And for our bilingual folks, that would be mentiras. Lies. There was some deception, some falsehood, but you're never going to know unless you tune into that episode.
And I remember how that came about.
That's right.
And it was like, are they going to take away your diploma?
That's right. Are they going to completely negate the winning soccer season and all that other stuff?
I don't know. You'll just have to go back and listen to Roberto's episode. It aired earlier this spring, a couple of months ago.
That's right. Okay.
What's your fourth one?
My fourth one. This is going to be the lightning rod of this podcast.
Oh, man.
And I'm certain that, and I'm here for it. Throw all the shade, throw all the hate that you want. But I do have to say that one of my most memorable episodes here in the studio was with none other than Dr. Matt Rostami, running for mayor of McKinney. And,
that was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun. I ran into him in the parking lot. He kind of looked at me sideways, not really sure. He wasn't rude or anything to me there in the parking lot. And when we got up here, he kind of had that, because if you've seen photos of the studio, he's he's the furthest from the door. James and I are between him and the door. And, it was kind of tense to start off with. But, not only do I have to say, give kudos to Dr. Rostami for coming in, I have to give big kudos to none other than James Jenkins himself. Because, and I encourage you, go to that video and watch it, because before anything was said, before anything started, before we got into the podcast, the first thing that James did was he apologized to Dr. Rostami, because there was
beef.
Yeah, there was beef. It's like, actually, I think there's still beef right now. But
at this point, the beef is totally one way, man.
But at that time, James realized that, that James could have approached that better. And rather than letting that ferment and stew throughout the whole thing and keep things awkward, James being the, the citizen that he is, the husband, the father, the good guy, I believe that in in elementary school, he was probably citizen of the week, multiple times.
I was homeschooled, so I was always the citizen of the
right.
week.
He got his name on the board, the star by all this stuff.
Yeah.
But James started right off publicly setting the record straight and apologizing to Dr. Rostami right off the bat. And
because I said he wasn't a serious candidate.
No.
And it's not up to me. It's up to the voters.
That's right. And James owned that. He didn't try to soft sell it. He didn't, I did this, but he didn't do any discounting things. He just said, I own it. So.
And then we went on to have a very interesting, insightful conversation. And, I can't speak for you, Fred, but I walked away from that thinking, man, this guy's charismatic, intelligent, driven, obviously very successful.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, there's a lot more to this guy than he puts out in some of these goofy videos where he's, wearing a clown suit and whatever else, talking about eating cats and whatnot.
And the Professor series and all those other things. But you know what? I try to tell people, because a lot of people approached me about that and said, how could you have him in the studio? Well, why would you even do that? I was like, listen, I said, just what you said. It's not up to us.
Yeah.
It's not up to us to tell you who to vote for or who you should have voted for. We just want to make sure that we are being as even and neutral as possible.
Yep.
And, as soon as
on the podcast, not necessarily in our personal lives.
Like we all have our own opinion, stuff like that. But here in the studio, he was one of the mayoral candidates. So we were like, come on in. And I think that overall it was a great episode. We learned so much about him, and he is an interesting person. Take that however you want. I just want to say, on behalf of at least this side of the couch, that I do have respect for the man, because it takes a lot to get out there and run for office, let alone the financial things, which we all know he spent zero. So with that. But yeah, that definitely was one of my highlight videos. Mark it. And, if you haven't seen that podcast, check it out.
So we've got 1, 2, 3.
You should be on your 5th
4.
one.
No, I'm counting how many Mondays we have between now and when this episode drops. Yeah. Because if there is a runoff for mayor, that runoff will be Saturday, June 7th. So if we split Matt Hamilton's episode in 2, then no, we still don't have enough. No, we won't know who the mayor is if there's a runoff. Because this episode will probably drop on Monday, June 2nd. So we won't know yet if there's a runoff. If there's not a runoff, obviously we'll know exactly who the mayor is.
That's right.
So, but yeah, Dr. Rostami was a very interesting guest. I'm glad we had him on.
That's right.
There is nothing like having someone come in expecting to be treated poorly, and they leave with a handshake and a smile and thanks for being cool. That went a lot better than I thought it was going to. May we always leave people better than they thought they were going to leave with us.
Absolutely.
Man.
Absolutely.
May we always. Last one, and this is kind of a two-parter because we've done this twice. The invitation from the folks at the Republican Party of Collin County, the young Republicans specifically, asking you and I to be the debate moderators for the mayoral debate, which then sparked us thinking, well, if we're going to do that, somebody should probably have a city council debate.
That's right.
With everybody on the same page. And one thing led to another. And so we did. We didn't just moderate something. We created an event from scratch.
High fives.
High fives. Again, thank you to our lovely wives, Elizabeth and Allison, who were integral to making that happen.
Absolutely.
And thank you to the sponsors as well. You know, they monetarily made that happen.
And thank you to the people who, who chimed in and had specific pointed questions that they wanted asked of these candidates.
It was such a fun thing to be able to debate, to be moderator for the debates of those two groups. You know, those 3 of the 7 people serving on city council went through a stage that we were moderating something for.
Yes.
And it's a tremendous privilege, I got to say. It's not something I take lightly. There's a responsibility to that, to be a person of substance and to approach it fairly and do our very best to remove personal bias.
That's right.
I'm convinced you don't actually have any personal bias because you toe the line like Switzerland, my friend. I catch flack because sometimes I say what I think more readily than I should. Meanwhile, Fred is just sitting back, arms casually folded, going, I'm good.
But you know what, though? I think when you first approached me about, what used to be the original concept, the Masters of McKinney, you remember that from back in the day?
Yep.
And then through COVID, as podcast, I thought about it. I was like, James and I are like-minded, but we are different personalities.
Oh, yeah.
Very different personalities. And I think that's part of what the success of the podcast has been thus far, is that you're willing to say the things that a lot of people are thinking. And
take the consequences for saying the things.
Because, if the house is on fire, you got to move.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, the house of McKinney's on fire, but there has to be some hard decisions made and some things said that might be hurtful to people. Things like, you're going to die, move. All right. So you're definitely of that aspect, and we need to have that. And at the same time, I think that, I do, well, truth be told, I am 15 years older than James. So, there's...
And yet so much more handsome.
There is. I don't know. It's Asian.
Perfect complexion.
Asian genetics.
How do you have better skin health than I do?
It's
I need to moisturize better.
That's right. Get some Asian genes.
Your wife is lucky you're so handsome.
No, I'm blessed that she is supermodel. But suffice it to say that there is an age gap here, and I'm not saying that I'm smarter and wiser than James.
I am. I'm definitely saying that.
But when it comes down to it, you have to have both sides of everything. There is a contemplative side to me, but there's also, an action side to me as well. But it can't just all be all action. There has to be the other side of it. When someone asks me on the side, like, how'd y'all get together on this? I'm like, well, that's because, it's balanced, and you think about all the things that you love, you love sweet things, you love salty things, but what are the best things? The things that are sweet and salty.
Preach.
Right? The things that are sour and sweet, things that are crunchy and dripping with caramel and whatever, So, when it comes down to it, yes. And even with the debates, we had a lot going on there. And I believe that through the debates, one of my favorite parts was where we had the discussion on the TERS and the ETJ. Because when those terms were brought up, there were several people I could hear in the crowd behind me, what is that?
Yeah.
What is that? And that was probably one of the highest highlights of moderating those debates, when that topic got brought up.
When new understanding happens.
Yes, absolutely. So yes,
Love
I definitely agree with that. Okay.
What's your last one, man?
My last one, is, we recorded them on the same day. I just mentioned, Dr. Matt Rostami, and right after him, we interviewed Matt Hamilton. It was the day of Matt that we had them. And if you do not know who Matt Hamilton is, he is a local legend, celebrity, entrepreneur, resource, and just a funny guy.
Yeah.
But
hilarious.
That's right. If you've ever been to the Augustus, the local Yokel,
Loyo Burger, LY Outfitters.
That's right. He's very strategic, especially, you think, okay, restaurant, meeting space / restaurants, restaurant and bar type thing, and
butcher
and clothing.
And burger joint.
Yeah, it's like, one of those doesn't belong. But if you want to know why he has LY Outfitters, you got to check out the podcast. But, probably one of the greatest things that he said in there, and I'll go ahead and spill the beans on this. He said, did you know that grocery stores are engineered to keep you in there? You get that new grocery cart, it's got the smooth wheels, the ball bearings, all those things. They are engineered to not be frictionless. They move at a certain speed, and that when you walk into a grocery store, all the things that touch the walls are like almost lost leaders for the grocery store. It's all the things that aren't on a wall is where they make their money. And if you time yourself, you're spending somewhere between $7 to $15 per minute when you're in the grocery store. And after that episode, Elizabeth and I went to the grocery store. I ran a timer. It was like $9 per minute.
Yep.
Crazy good. But if you want to know more, you got to check out, actually, by the time this drops, the 2 episodes.
Yeah, because we had to make it 2 episodes because otherwise it would be like an hour and 25 minutes.
Yes.
For one episode.
Yes.
And I know some of you love this show, but even y'all don't want to sit there and listen to an hour and 25-minute episode. No. So there will be part 1 and part 2 of Matt Hamilton.
That's right. That's
right. That is the only one of our 10 moments that has not yet dropped as we record this episode here today. So any final thoughts, man? Any call to action for year 2? You want to tell them what's going to be happening in year 2?
I don't want to peel back the curtain too much, but what I do want to say is that once again, James has been a strong, probably the primary driving force of this podcast. And, we have bullpenned ideas and we have spitballed some things. But when it came down to the list and the people, James has been, super diligent in getting to that. And we've had a lot of people suggest, and we've been excited to bring those people on. But, who do you know? Who do you know? My call to action is, who do you know that needs to be here in the studio, that we need to share their story? Who do you know that's already been in the studio that someone else needs to know about? Once again, we shared at the beginning, I've got lots of commas in my bank account from what I've made here. Unfortunately, it starts with 0. 0, 0, 0, go 0, 0, 0. And, we're going to continue on that. But there is so much that makes McKinney not only, unique by nature, but just great, awesome, incredible. The reason why we moved here, the reason why, and more for James because, he lived somewhere other than McKinney. But he realized that, McKinney is where it's at. And,
it is where it's at.
And he made that decision to move. He didn't have to move. We know a lot of people that commute. But when it comes down to it, McKinney is where it's at. So who do you know? Put it in the comments. And I've talked to a lot of people. They're like, I was thinking about suggesting such and such, but you've probably already heard their name. And I was like, no, we haven't.
Yep.
No, we haven't. So one thing that will help us, because like I said, we'll sit down and we'll trade names and between us and our wives, and we'll well, why would we have them on? If we have someone that, or a person that continually gets referenced that says, you should have them on the podcast, that makes our job even easier.
Yep.
Because we can just go to them and say, hey, you have been called out many times that you are someone that needs to be in this podcast. So don't hesitate. Don't think that, your voice doesn't count, because it does. Don't think that your suggestion is small, because it's not. Give us the people that we should have here, because we want to celebrate them. We want to see to their success. We want to see them grow and flourish just like we were able to here in McKinney.
My call to action is, what's going to be the first 1,000 download episode? Because the mayor debate now has more than 2,000 views on YouTube. I don't know if you knew that or not.
No, I didn't. I never look at the stats. I'm always just into it.
we have had several episodes, actually a lot of episodes now, that have been more than 500 downloads. We don't have a single episode yet that is over 500 or over 1,000 downloads. Who's gonna be the first 1,000 download episode? Now, I should say, I am talking about in the first 30 days. Mm-hmm. I don't pay attention looking back at historical stuff, because obviously, an episode that's been out for 10 months has a lot more opportunity to gain downloads than one that just dropped 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I'm talking first 30 days. who's gonna hit 1,000 downloads first.
And if it hits 1,000 in the first 30 days, James will do karaoke.
I will leave a voicemail of your choice, singing a song that you like. There you go. How's that for NPR?
Oh, man.
Isn't that not a good NPR giveaway?
That's like the
man.
that wait what what
Wait, don't tell me.
That's it.
Yeah, man. Am I a nerd for knowing what that is?
Well, I know what it is. I just couldn't remember the title.
Wait, don't tell me.
Yes.
Yeah, or you have a way with words. That's the one we also like on
those
Saturdays.
Those are both fun ones to listen to.
All right. What do you know? It's a 50-minute long run time. We just can't. We can't get out of our own way. It just happens.
That's right.
Hey, do you want to make a change on Team Shark or Team Polar Bear? Now's your chance. You can switch over to my side if you want to. I know you've wanted to for a while, but you haven't admitted it to yourself.
But just like we're like the sweet and salty, the sweet and sour thing. I approach that particular question like I approach pretty much everybody's. Like everybody has something to offer, and there's always an opportunity for what seems like the underdog to become the champion. And so I'm just gonna. I believe in both of them, but there's just something about Team Shark. I don't know. I like both of them.
Even this answer here is just not very committed.
That's right.
I feel like you want to be on Team Polar Bear.
But I love Team Polar Bear. What's funny is James and I both have a thing for camera gear, and I just recently joined Team Polar
Sony.
Bear. That's right.
Team Sony Polar Bear. Mr. A9 Mark III with a big fancy lens on it.
Right.
Or as Tim Taylor used to say on Home Improvement, more power. All right, folks, that's it for now. Hey, tell a friend about the McKinney Podcast. Let's blow this thing up in our second year. It's been a whole lot of fun. Can't wait to keep doing it with you. Peace.